Welcome to the Criminal Imagination. This series is not a tale of logic and reason. It is a descent into shadows, secrets, and the crimes that refuse to die. We will uncover the forgotten roots of crime fiction, haunted mansions, unreliable confessions, spectral witnesses, and guilty minds fractured by mirrors and blood. And through this, we will explore how fear, guilt, madness, and supernatural shape the genre we believed we understood. This is the archive of the repressed. Welcome to Gothic Evidence, Dark Inheritance, a world where justice limps behind secrets, where madness wears the velvet coat, and the blood on the floor tells stories older than law or even time. Today, let us begin, not with clarity, but with a little confusion. Not with meaning, but with fracture. Because crime, when it is at its most haunting, does not rely on the blunt evidence of a fingerprint or a knife. It coils itself into words, and words, as you know, can be more dangerous than any weapon. Language is the oldest accomplice of crime, concealing, misleading, mistranslating, inventing codes only the guilty can break, or the innocent can stumble upon too late. This is language as trap. Tonight, we descend into the labyrinth of words, into translation as betrayal, interpretation as violence, and the way the Gothic crime imagination thrives in that terrifying space where language fails. In these shadows, truth hides not in silence, but in words that mean too many things, or nothing at all. Our first book, Ernesto Sabato's The Tunnel. Juan Pablo Castel, the painter-narrator, believes that he has found in one woman, Maria, a witness who sees what no one else can see. He clings to her recognition of a detail in his painting, a small window in the corner. To him, this window is not just an image, but a code, a secret that only she understands. Castle says, I had always thought that in all my paintings there was one detail, just one detail, which went unnoticed by people in general, and which in some way contained the key to the whole work. In this painting, for example, the key was the little window. The entire spiral of obsession and eventual murder begins with interpretation. Her reading of his work, his belief that she alone speaks the same language of symbols, the tunnel of meaning that only they share. Yet, notice how fragile this tunnel is. Castle demands certainty in language, certainty that Maria truly understands him. But what if she only guessed? What if she translated his painting incorrectly? His entire crime emerges from mistrust in translation itself, the suspicion that words, glances, and interpretations betray. This is the trap. Language, far from clarifying, fractures meaning, and the Gothic crime story revels in this fracture. It is not satisfied with evidence, it digs beneath, whispering, what if the words we trust are already corrupted? Sábato writes in the Argentine tradition of paranoia and silence, in a country haunted by repression and secret codes, where the difference between truth and lie could mean life or disappearance. Castle, in this monologue, becomes a distorted translator, translating Maria's silences, her movements, her possible affairs into the code of his own madness. In one moment he admits, all of us to a greater or a lesser degree are mad. And this madness is not only psychological, it is linguistic. His madness is a desperation for translation that cannot betray, for words that cannot slip. The impossibility of that desire becomes the root of his crime. Now turn to Mercè Rodoreda's Death in the Spring, a novel written in Catalan, often interpreted as an allegory of Francois' pain. It is a work where language itself feels like a ritual punishment. Here, meaning is distorted not by one obsessed narrator, but by an entire village bound by rules that make no sense. Rules carried forward like dead translations of forgotten laws. The boy narrator moves through a world of arbitrary rituals, drowning prisoners in cement, forcing the dying to swallow cement so their souls do not escape, covering houses with pink powder. All of it reads like language emptied of its meaning yet still enforced with absolute violence. Rodoreda's village is a Gothic space of mistranslation. Ancient codes are preserved without understanding. The rituals are the relics of forgotten meaning, enforced by fear rather than reason. Translation has become ossified law, carried forward, misunderstood, and brutal. The child narrator tries to interpret, but language refuses him clarity. He says, "Everything I learned in silence because things cannot be explained." That line is not merely poetic, it is the scream of a society where words no longer correspond to truth, where translation has become a weapon of domination. In Sábato, Castell commits murder because translation cannot be trusted. Rodoreda's village commits ritual violence because translation is no longer possible. Meaning has collapsed into repetition. What is preserved is only the ghost of the code. Notice the Gothic crime motif here. Both works circle around interpretation. Castell thinks Maria is his translator, the only one who understands his visual code. When that belief wavers, he collapses into suspicion, jealousy, and blood. Rodoreda's boy lives in a society where no one remembers the key to their codes, but they still follow them with cruelty. In both, language is a trap. It holds people hostage to suspicion or to ritual. But why should crime fiction, especially Gothic crime fiction, be so obsessed with translation? Because translation exposes the instability of truth. In a murder trial, in a confession, in a diary, in a code scribbled on the wall of a prison cell, everything depends on words. Yet, words are always unstable, always carrying too much or too little. The Gothic adds a layer. It reminds us that the instability is not accidental, but spectral. It haunts language itself. Think of the criminal confession. Every confession is a translation, the translation of inner thoughts into words. But what if that translation falters? Castell, in the tunnel, offers his confession to us as readers. He tells us everything, but his narration is twisted, paranoid, obsessive. Is he translating reality or constructing it? Can we ever translate a guilty mind without distortion? Think of the spectral witness, the ghost who communicates in fragments, dreams, or riddles. The message is always a problem of translation. Hamlet's father's ghost speaks, but his words are unstable. Are they truth or devil's lie? The Gothic crime story is filled with letters in strange hands, diaries in code, whispered words overheard through walls. Each becomes a trap of translation. Rodoreda's novel takes this further. The village rituals are themselves a translation of history. Once perhaps these practices meant something, tied to survival or myth, but now their meaning is lost. The translation has become disconnected from the original, and still the people obey, drowning their own in cement, repeating words they do not understand. This language, this language is a crime in itself, the enforcement of empty codes that kill. And think again of Sábato. Castle's tunnel is not only a metaphor for isolation, it's a metaphor for language. Every person lives in their tunnel of interpretation, their own translation of the world. He says, between her world and mine there was only a narrow tunnel, and that's why I killed her. He cannot endure the instability of translation. He demands absolute transparency of meaning, which is impossible. His crime is the Gothic crime language, the refusal to accept ambiguity. So when we say language as trap, we are not speaking metaphorically. We are speaking of crime fiction's very foundation. Evidence, witness testimony, confession, law, all depend on words. But Gothic crime fiction whispers. What if the words themselves cannot be trusted? What if the translation is already a betrayal? Let us widen the view. Translation, in its pure sense, is always haunted by mistrust. Walter Benjamin once wrote that translation is not about transmitting meaning, but about touching the afterlife of the text. In the Gothic crime tradition, that afterlife becomes literal. Words are coarse and translators are mediums. Castle tries to make Maria his medium. The village of death in spring is haunted by ancestral codes no one remembers. The Gothic turns translation into a seance, and crime emerges when the seance goes wrong. So what does this say about us? That our systems of justice, our archives, our histories are themselves acts of translation. That every record is haunted by what is lost. That law itself is a code passed down, translated, mistranslated, enforced long after its origin is forgotten. The Gothic crime genre exposes this. It stages the courtroom, the confession, the diary, not as transparent, but as haunted scripts. Perhaps that is why these novels unsettle us so deeply, because they remind us that to read, to listen, to interpret is already to risk error, betrayal, and crime. Maria may or may not have understood the painting's window. The boy in Rodoreda's village may or may not have ever known why the rituals exist. We, too, may never know where we have translated them correctly. And yet, crime still takes place. Blood still spills. This is the dark power of Gothic crime fiction. It does not simply tell us who killed whom. It tells us that the very words we use to say who and whom might already be misleading us, that interpretation is dangerous, that translation can be fatal. So I ask you, as you think about these novels, as you reflect on the ghosts that whisper through them, how much of your own world is built on mistranslation, on words passed down without origin, on codes you obey without understanding? And when does misunderstanding cross over into crime? Try to answer these questions and come back. Until next time, remember, in the archive of shadows, words do not save us, they betray us. This has been the Criminal Imagination.